I think his assessment of the success of those strikes maybe a bit premature. I'm not sure that the regime is prepared to do that. In fact, if you look at the statements coming out of the regime right now, they are threatening to strike America in response. They are threatening American servicemen. We are not hearing the kind of rhetoric from a regime that has just sustained it will not take another step, because the president has said that he will send more assets to the region, and I think, as he put it, destroy all of them in sort of one fell swoop.
John, thank you so much for talking to ANI. A strong statement from the U.S. Commander in Chief giving a warning shot to Iran. Your assessment of President Trump's statement from the White House earlier today?
Yeah, I watched it. It was a very short speech, surprisingly short, given the way that I think the president can be prone to going on for a bit. I think his assessment of the success of those strikes maybe a bit premature. I think there's going to be a press conference tomorrow morning out of Washington at 8 a.m. Local time, where I believe the Secretary of Defense, as well as some of his top generals, will very likely give a much more in-depth assessment of exactly what was destroyed at each of those three nuclear sites. But what I think was probably the most remarkable about the speech was that Donald Trump is calling for Iran's full and complete capitulation, a complete surrender. And right now, I'm not sure that the regime is prepared to do that. In fact, if you look at the statements coming out of the regime right now, they are threatening to strike America in response. They are threatening American servicemen. We are not hearing the kind of rhetoric from a regime that has just sustained a massive blow to its military and its nuclear structures. There is no coming back from this for the regime. They have lost a huge, I mean, they've lost their entire Air Force. They have lost their air defenses. They have lost their nuclear facilities. There is just really not much to operate with right now other than asymmetric attacks and whatever is left of their missile arsenal. I guess we'll wait and see whether the Israelis sustain strikes, whether the United States sustains strikes. But this is a regime that appears defiant, despite the president's assessment that they are effectively a spent force.
Right. So, John, what do you think is part two of this development? Would securing the homeland be one of Donald Trump's priority? Or would you see Iran likely respond to direct U.S. strikes on its nuclear facility? Or could this be just this attack is one and done?
Well, I think that if the regime is smart, it will not take another step, because the president has said that he will send more assets to the region, and I think, as he put it, destroy all of them in sort of one fell swoop. And that is certainly possible for the U.S. military to do. The capabilities are there. I think that right now I'm looking at a couple things. One is large salvos of missiles. In fact, perhaps missiles with heavier payloads instead of the 1,000 kilogram payloads that maybe we'd be looking at 2,000. So more damage. And these would be fired at Israel. The Israeli Home Front Command is on high alert right now in the aftermath of these strikes, and I suspect that they will be on high alert for quite some time. I am concerned about asymmetric attacks here in the United States, sleeper cells in particular. My understanding is that a couple of days ago, when Donald Trump said that he was weighing his options and that within 2 weeks he would make a decision about striking Iran, my understanding is that part of that was about trying to assess the security needs of the United States here in the homeland, as well as the needs of our bases and our embassies and our consulates abroad, because this is the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism. They have the means, they have the will, they've got the capabilities. If they choose to attack the United States, they certainly can do so. And so that's what I'm watching right now.
Now, President Trump in his speech praised the military of Israel, the military of the United States. He talked about how the two countries work together like never before. Do you in any way reckon that today's attack has a real chance to change the status quo of the region and Israel, like what Trump supporters are talking about?
Look, I think two things to note here. Number one is I've had the sense from very early on that these two men have been coordinating closely. The Israelis, when they launched their attack last Thursday night, they did so on day 61 after Trump's 60-day deadline. And when Trump was asked about it at the time, he was very complimentary, even though only a couple days before news was swarming that the United States was warning Israel not to attack. I get a sense that this was coordinated from very early on in the second Trump administration. Now, I think for the question of what does it all mean, um, I think obviously we need to wait and see how the Iranian regime responds, how it reacts, and whether it invites more attacks. If it capitulates and it is forced to surrender on certain terms, absolutely, this is the beginning of a different Middle East, because this regime in Iran has cast a dark shadow over the entire Middle East since 1979. It has been the single solitary source of so much destruction and just horrific acts that have taken place across the region. The destabilization of Lebanon, the destabilization of Iraq, the supporting of Shiite militias in Iraq against the U.S., in Afghanistan. I mean, when you look at what's happened in Gaza, the utter destruction that has taken place there because of Iran's support for Hamas, all of these things, right, we have a moment here to reset in every one of these jurisdictions. It doesn't mean that everyone is going to suddenly wake up and want to engage in normalization with Israel and to sing kumbaya, but one does get the sense that with Iran out of the picture, that normalization across the Middle East is probably more likely, or at least it's something that's more feasible, let's say, than it was just a few short days ago. Really, I think it started with the war with the Israelis flexing muscles and essentially showing the world that it could continue to fight the way that Israel has always been known to fight, which is to be aggressive, to fight on the enemy's soil, and to demonstrate that they're the strongest army in the Middle East. They've done that. They got the attention of the Gulf Arab states, and now Donald Trump has made it unmistakable that the United States and Israel are working together, and that makes Israel that much stronger and harder to ignore when the president tells the Arab world that it's time to make peace and move on.
Let's talk about the economic um, impact on this. How might this impact oil markets and the global economy, particularly the Strait of Hormuz? If Iran closes it, does that have an impact, especially on India?
Oh, I mean, absolutely, it would have an impact. I think the question right now is, do they really want to do that at this moment after having sustained the damage that they have? Any attempt to close the Strait of Hormuz right now will be met, I think, with probably unbelievable force from the United States. And you have to remember, now that this has started, it's not that difficult to imagine the French or the Brits coming in to clear the lanes, right? Not necessarily to join the war, so to speak, but to clear the lanes so that the traffic can continue. So I see the Iranians as being absolutely suicidal if they go down this route. And I do get a sense that we could be at a pivotal moment here. It doesn't mean that Iran won't try to attack, but I think asymmetrically is much more likely than through conventional means.
Your assessment of this overall operation, the silence and the deception from the US side, it probably relaxed the Iranians a bit. Do you agree on that? And talk to us about how this operation was ideated and executed.
Well, I think in many ways this thing was planned, maybe 15 years ago. I mean, there is a sense that we have that there have been assets in Iran for a very long time. But I think something around 8 months ago, we understand that the drones that were used to attack a lot of the scientists and the military men, these were the initial waves and the strikes that were carried out. This was done from Iranian soil. It was done right under the nose of the Iranians. Not a lot, not that too different from what we saw from Operation Spiderweb, what the Ukrainians did in striking Russian aircraft on Russian soil. And so what you can see is years of planning and then months of planning and then flawless execution. The Mossad, the IDF, the Israeli Air Force, Israeli military intelligence, and now, of course, U.S. intelligence, U.S. military. It has all come together in a very seamless way. It actually almost feels inevitable now that we look at it. This is a truly remarkable moment here in the Middle East.